Hello, it's Gordon here. Hope all is well with you. This Facebook Live I've called Equal Pay for Women, Ridiculous Idea. Oh, hang on. Equal pay for women in sport. Ridiculous idea. Oh, hang on. Equal pay for women in football. Ridiculous idea. Because equal pay for women is obviously a key transformation point, which is why I'm doing it in this group, about personal development, self-improvement, goal achievement, and the campaigning for equal pay in women, and the fact that unequal pay for women was just accepted. It was just accepted in society. Well, of course, women don't earn as much as men. What a ridiculous idea. Now, in society as a whole, that idea is gone now. In society as a whole, it is accepted that women should get the same pay as men if they're doing the same jobs. Now, in this video, I'm talking about sport. I'm talking about sport in particular, because when I was watching the Women's World Cup this summer, there was a lot of talk about it, because one of the pundits was a big famous goalkeeper for the States, and she's always moaned that FIFA and the independent countries bodies are not doing enough to promote women's football and are not doing enough about the pay. Because when it comes to pay, the prize money for the World Cup, for the Women's World Cup in France this summer, totaled about $30 million in total for all of the teams. The States, the US that won the tournament, they got about $4 million out of a total prize fund of $30 million. The prize fund for the Men's World Cup last year, $400 million. Now that's not equal, is it? $30 million for the women, $400 million for the men. Now, one argument is that the discrepancy in pay there is because of the discrepancy in the product and subsequently the discrepancy in revenue. Because here's an example. Women's Super League in England, the main league for women's football in England, what do you think the average attendance is for a women's Super League match in England? I'll give you a couple of seconds to have a little think. And while you're doing that, I'll tell you that in the men's league, obviously Man United, Liverpool, Arsenal, Man City, Chelsea, their home games will have 60, 70,000 or more at their games. 60 or 70,000. Women's Super League, the question was, what do you think the average attendance was at a women's Super League game? Was it 60 or 70,000? No, it was under 1,000. Three figures, we're talking in the hundreds, under 1,000 people at an average Women's Super League game. So how much revenue do you think that's going to bring in compared to 60 or 70,000 at these top men clubs? Well, obviously it's clearly different, isn't it? So if they're not bringing in the revenue, you're not getting the merchandise sales, you're not getting the TV coverage, you're not getting the sponsorship, because you're not getting the TV coverage and because you're not getting the sales at the gate. So it's a self-perpetuating cycle, isn't it? And if that's the case, why should the women have equal pay? It's an interesting question, isn't it? But because I used to be of that view, because women's football is not as good as a product. It's great women's football in itself, but it's not as good a product as the men's game. In my view, for example, and I've been watching women's football, by the way, for over 15 years. I remember watching the European Championships in England in 2004. So I followed the England women's football team for over 15 years. I'm a big fan, I'm a big supporter. In fact, I went to see them at a local ground here in one of their qualifying matches. But this idea about the difference in pay being reflected by the difference in product, well, it's interesting because FIFA say that the money can't be separated like that, because when it comes to TV rights or sponsorship rights, it's sold as a package. So the TV rights to the World Cup, for example, will include the Women's World Cup. Sponsorship rights for the World Cup, Men's World Cup, will include the Women's World Cup. So FIFA say, well, it doesn't work like that. We can't separate it out like that. So then that does beg the question, why are they not paid the same? It's fascinating, isn't it? On the goal achievement, self-improvement front. Whose responsibility is it? Is it down to FIFA, the world body? Is it down to the individual nations, down to their federations? Is it down to the clubs? Really interesting. And I know something I spoke about at the weekend with Women's Rugby League, that women's football now, what they're thinking of doing is holding the matches in Premier League stadiums before a Premier League match, to try and get in some of the crowd who are there to watch the male Premier League matches, to get them to watch the women's games and therefore grow the game, grow the audience, grow the interest, grow the sponsorship, grow the TV coverage, etc, etc, etc. Fascinating. Women's tennis, Wimbledon was on, also finished this month, and it used to be that the the men's champion in tennis got paid a lot more at Wimbledon than the women's singles champion. Used to be the case, and there was a lot of hoo-ha about it. It is no longer the case. Hasn't been the case for well over 10 years. I think it was 2007, there was equality between what the men's single champion got and the women's single champions got. But the women don't play 5 sets, do they? It's not the same product. You might say it's not the same product entertainment-wise. I'm not sure I agree with that, because they're different. Well, obviously, clearly they're different. Men's sport and women's sport are different for all sorts of different reasons. Now, I'm not making any comment about whether one is better than the other. I enjoy both. However, one of the reasons that I watch and enjoy women's sport often more than the men's version is because of the development nature of the sport. Because I like that transformational improvement, development side of life. I love watching it. I love seeing it play out. And you can see it in women's sport loud and clear. Let's look at pole vault in the Olympics. I remember when pole vault was first in the Olympics. Sydney 2000, I think it was. I say I remember, I'm just saying I think it was Sydney 2000. It used to be that women weren't allowed to do the pole vault because it was considered too dangerous, that women were not capable, or it wasn't safe for women to do it. I mean, nowadays in 2019, you think, can you imagine that? But that was the case, and it was just accepted. Women's pole vault, don't be ridiculous. And now, obviously, women's pole vault is one of the major events in the Olympics because of the drama that the pole vault final brings, whatever sex it is. It's fascinating, isn't it? I was watching the netball World Cup, which is also finished recently. Now, that is a small sport. It's a small sport when it comes to TV coverage, by the way. BBC are pushing it, but the BBC are pushing a lot of sports that they've still got the rights to, because they've lost a lot of the major massive sports, which has gone to paid TV. So BBC are left with pushing what they've got. And one of those things they've got is netball. So the BBC are pushing netball. Now, I didn't even know that male netball is a thing. Did you know that male netball is a thing? It is a thing, apparently. But male netball is not recognised by the International Netball Federation. It's not even officially a thing, according to the International Netball Federation. And that's one of the reasons why netball isn't in the Olympics at the moment. It should be, and it could be, but it isn't, because the Olympics states that any sport has to be recognised and available to all genders. But I was going to say both sexes, but I suppose in this day and age it's all genders. So male netball, yeah, there's only a few male netball teams, and do they get paid the same as the women? No, they don't. There's pretty much no pay in male netball. It's pretty much a volunteer thing. A couple of the women's teams are taking on sort of starting male academies, but it's funny because women's netball as a game says, well, we don't want to be taken over by the men. We like our netball as it is. But they also say, well, if we want to be in the Olympics and we're talking about netball being great because it's an inclusive sport, well, we've got to be embracing and welcoming of male netball then, haven't we? And the answer is yes. But male netballers don't get paid the same. Are male netballers striking and having sit-down protests for equal pay? Well, of course they're not, because it's a tiny niche sport. So they're not at that level yet. That doesn't even come into the equation. They just accept that it is an unpaid sport that they're doing, dare I say it, for the fun of it. But when you get into the higher echelons in a sport that has massive pay at the top level, it is a fascinating argument. When there is a disparity between the men and the women, why is there the disparity, and whose responsibility is it to do something about it? Very, very interesting. Because FIFA say, well, yeah, 30 million prize fund for the World Cup this year, that's double what it was in 2015 for the last event. It's doubled. Isn't that great? And the women are saying, well, yeah, hang on, it might be great, but you're still paying the men more than 10 times as much. Not double pay, more than 10 times as much. And the argument is that that clearly is not right and it's not sustainable. I don't know, I'm not so sure. With that attendance at a women's Super League match in 3 figures, less than 1,000. Does that warrant them being on the same level as the men? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is to that. Because the development argument could be, well, if you give us equal pay and we've got hundreds of millions coming into the game, then we're going to develop the game. Because we can go on grassroots programs to develop the game, to find the players at schools. We can invest into the infrastructure, which basically means paying the players and paying the backroom staff, which of course is going to grow the game. The more money you put into any sport, the better the sport will get, because of coaching and because of facilities. If the coaching and facilities improve, the product on the pitch gets better and more competitive, which brings in the viewers, the sponsorship, the TV, etc. Fascinating, fascinating, fascinating. Let me know what you think. Did you watch the women's football? Do you watch the netball? Did you know that male netball was a thing? What do you think about equal pay for women in sport? Should it be an automatic thing, or should it be dependent on something? Dependent on results, dependent on viewers? Should it be dependent on anything? And if you want, you can talk about an equal pay in society, outside of sport. Is unequal pay still a thing in society that you know of? Interesting, isn't it? And important, by the way. Not just interesting. It is important, because with the women's footballers, this is their livelihood. That's how they earn their living, or that's how they try to earn their living. A lot of players in teams doing well in the Women's World Cup are still amateur footballers. They've still got jobs back in their countries because they're not getting enough pay to earn a living from football. Is that right in 2019? Good questions, aren't they? I don't want to waffle on too long because I'm not sure what the answers are, so I'd be interested to hear what people think. Do leave your comments below this video, wherever you happen to be seeing the video. Signing off for now. Hope all is well with you, wishing you as ever health and happiness, and I'll speak to you again soon.